Welcome to dentReviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Dunu SA6. Thanks again to Mark over at Super Review for loaning me these, giving me a chance to hear these. As you can see, this is a new form of review for me. I'm going to be doing more in person, a little bit more intimate kind of a setting where you can see me and my luscious hair, which is also longer than Mark's, I might add. Anyhow, this is the SA6. This is a balanced armature. I think it's like a combination of Knowles and Sonyon balanced armature drivers. It is a very neutral tonality. Oh, I hear the cat. And there's my cat. Hi, kitty. So, isn't this the internet, huh? It's a fitting intro to the first review that you get to meet my cat. This is Roulette. Say hi, Roulette. To the camera. You don't want to stay? Okay. So as I was saying, this is a more of a neutral tonality IEM. It is balanced armature, and if you know me by now, you'll probably know I'm not a huge fan of balanced armature drivers. I think they have a lack of like a visceral texture, the tactility, the timbre. I prefer dynamic drivers and possibly EST, but not really balanced armatures. However, there are a few models that are balanced armature that I actually think sound very, very good. This is actually one of them. This might be my favorite all balanced armature driver earphone that I've heard. It's up there with the Moondrop S8, which is also a phenomenal balanced armature driver earphone. It has a very clean, very nice transient treble. It's extended. It has a nice, smooth and linear bass. And the mids are superb. The only flaw that I hear with the Dunu in terms of frequency response would be that in the sort of lower to mid treble, there's a sort of a dip. And that dip is followed by a slight bump. And what that ultimately results in is sort of a peaky sound. And I'm not saying that the treble sounds peaky per se, but simply that in comparison to a smooth and flat linear treble, it gives the impression that there's something kind of wonky in a very small area, and that kind of gives the treble a dryness that almost has a sort of gritty texture to it, very slight. I want to stress that this is relative to earphones of this caliber, which I believe are very neutral, very high quality. So considering that, something like the S8 is a little bit smoother, maybe a little bit more revealing in the treble than these, in the sense that they don't have a grainy texture. It's not that they sound grainy. They don't. They sound very smooth. One of the smoothest, nicest, most revealing balanced armatures that I've heard. But there is, in just a true sense, a little bit of that graininess, and I believe it's from that treble shape, and it just causes a little bit of that impression. The mids are phenomenal. They're very, very smooth, very linear, and the bass is also phenomenal and very, very smooth. Now, on the back of these, there is actually a switch, and there's a mode, I think it's called acoustic immersion mode or something ridiculous, but basically it's a slight bass boost, and it's very slight, maybe 2 decibels or something along the lines of that, and I think it just is probably, I'm going off memory here, but I think it's somewhere around maybe 300 hertz and down. It just slopes up a little bit. It's very slight. Honestly, I think you'd be hard-pressed to notice it unless you were doing a quick comparison, which you can actually do with these in your ear. And I'll just show you the fit real quick. These are very, very comfortable. If I slide these in my ear here, see they fit very nicely. They're a little large. They're not the smallest earphone, but they're not really like chonky by any means compared to similar, what I call these sort of a custom universal IEM. They're not customs, but they have that sort of ear design that they try to mold to the shape of your ear a little bit, and I like that. So given that, these are kind of mid to large maybe, and they fit comfortably. I don't feel any pressure on any part of my ears. They feel nice. They are easy to insert. They come with nice ear tips. I don't know what style they are, but they're attractive translucent plastic, if these are the original ear tips. And they feel good. They seal well. They're kind of a medium bore tip, and they have the around the ear guides. They're kind of molded into the cable. Can keep the shape a little bit. The cable, actually, before I go any further with the sound, is really nice. I think that Dunu makes pretty good cables in general. I love the 112 cable. That EST 112 is a great cable. This has a similar termination. It's got a right angle connection. It is the removable Dunu connector that allows you to swap and exchange to a smaller or larger tip style here. And if I can do this while I'm looking at myself here, it goes that way. It snaps back in. It's a small right angle connector, which I like a lot. It fits any kind of case. You can see the little bevel here isn't very large, so it'll go into any phone case easily. It's not chonky. It's a little bit long, but it's not really that bad. It doesn't really get in the way. I haven't minded it in actual use. I'd prefer it to just be the length of the connector itself and not have the ability to switch, because the 3.5, in my opinion, is perfectly adequate for anything. You can easily use a 1/4-inch adapter if you want larger, and that is what it is. The cable itself has a little bit of strain relief, nothing much here, but it seems fairly durable. It's pretty good thickness, and it comes to my favorite part is the centerpiece. I love small centerpieces, and the actual cord cinch works really well, and it folds down here to the centerpiece and kind of looks nice. The only negative I have, if I had to say there was one negative at all, is I'm not a huge fan of the thicker cable diameter on the earpiece length. I feel like it just adds to the overall bulk of the earphone and makes it a little bit less convenient to wrap, because if I were to wrap this thing up, you can see that's quite a bit of cable compared to something like an Etymotic or even the Oxygen by Tangeme, or however you say that. But it's a nicely made cable. It feels good. I think it's attractive. It works well. It's a standard 2-pin connector that you find on a lot of Dunu and Moondrop type earphones. So that's it. It's got a nice wooden style shell with Dunu written on the faceplate. All in all, it's a pretty good design physically. Now back to the sound. I think that it is very linear. As I was describing the frequency response, the bass is what I would consider balanced armature bass. And I know that sounds generic, but I just mean that even though it measures very linear, it doesn't have a lot of impact and tight, firm texture that you'd find in a similar response with a dynamic driver. But considering that it is so linear, especially with the bass boost enabled, given that it's a balanced armature, I think the bass actually sounds really, really good. It sounds superb. There's no masking in the mid bass. It's not bloated. It's not really... A lot of balanced armatures will increase the mid bass or the low bass to try to compensate for the fact that it has that texture or that lack of texture. I believe that's why they do it. And this doesn't suffer from that. So on the one hand, you might find that they don't really give you that full body that you want. But on the other hand, if you're familiar with the driver technology and the way they sound, I think for a balanced armature driver, the bass sounds really good. And if you are comfortable with that level of bass and you're familiar with that, the quality of the bass and the smoothness of the bass is superb. So just tonally, as a whole, I think the frequency response is excellent. Possibly one of the best in terms of balanced armatures, or really any earphone that I've heard. It's very good, other than that minor inconsistency in the treble that I was referring to. Technicalities. This is kind of a interesting subject. People have different opinions on this. I believe fairly strongly that frequency response is the single most important factor, but it's obviously not the only factor. In fact, as I was just mentioning, balanced armatures have a different timbre or textural quality than dynamic drivers. And from my limited experience, I think EST drivers also have even a different texture beyond that. And that can be put down to many factors. It can be attributed to the size of the driver, the impulse response of the driver. It can be attributed to the transient attack, the decay, and all those different sort of technical specifications and abilities of the driver. So do they sound different? Sure. But as a whole, how different do they sound compared to the frequency response of two different earphones differing? I would say that if you took any two earphones there are practically, they're most likely going to have a larger degree of variation because of the frequency response than they are because of a technical aspect. And there could be exceptions, and I could be wrong. This is all just theory based on my experience and listening and my understanding of these technologies. But needless to say, frequency response wise, I believe these are phenomenal. They're excellent. Technicality wise, I think they're very good. I think they're high quality, definitely in the upper echelon of earphones. I think that they have a very precise sort of imaging. They have an open and natural sound, and yet they're not the most holographic. They don't have the most precise and absolutely convincing soundstage that I've ever heard, but they're very, very good. One of the best. Just as a comparison, I have the Moondrop Illumination, which I'll be doing another review of. I love that earphone. It's a phenomenal earphone. And it has probably a less perfect frequency response in some aspects. It's kind of a balance between the two. But that has a much more natural and open sound to my ears. There's really no unevenness in the treble, no peaks or dips that stand out. So the treble exudes a very smooth, creamy, natural quality to it. Although the treble there is a little bit more forward in the lower treble, so it gives it a colder, more etymodic-like sound. The Illumination also has less sound isolation, which kind of gives an enhanced perception of soundstage and just the sound being around you in the room. And whether that's good or bad, it kind of depends on your situation. In my situation, that's bad. The lack of isolation oftentimes means that I have ambient noise interfering with my music. But with all of those things, taken into account, I think the SA6 improves upon the Illumination in that it's a little bit more relaxed treble, but it lacks the precision of the, I guess you call it the micro lineation of the frequency response. In other words, from let's say 1,000 hertz up to 10,000 hertz. The Illumination is very smooth with some slight bumps and whatnot. I think the SA6 is pretty smooth, but then has a big dip followed by a light bump, and then it kind of goes off. So in terms of its true linearity, I think something like the Illumination allows the treble to sound more smooth and pleasing in its texture because of the dynamic driver, and in its imaging because of the linear nature of the treble. But again, they're trade-offs. The SA6 is more relaxing to listen to than the Illumination in that it's not as forward in the lower treble, that, let's say, 1 to 5, 6, 7 kilohertz range. It's a little bit more relaxed there. And that dip can actually, I think, contribute to the sense of spaciousness, even though I believe it's a false sense in some regards. And it's hard to say that because it probably needs a lot of explanation, but a common trend that earphones have is that they'll scoop some of the treble followed by a boost in an upper area. And it really enhances the sound stage or the perception that there's space in the recording. That unfortunately is not always true to the recording, but it is a nice sound, and if it's done gently, it can give an enhanced sort of high definition imaging without really sounding like it's altering the recording much. And I think that's where the SA6 fall. I think they give the recording a very nice, open, clean treble without sounding like they're really altered much at all, honestly. But in a critical analysis compared to something like the Illumination or something similar, Etymotic, for instance, it does suffer from a lack of that ultra smooth treble, in my opinion. It just has just the slightest bit of, I guess I'd call it grain. Very small and only in the sort of mid to upper treble. So overall, it's a really good performer, and I think that if I were to have these as my main earphone, I'd be completely happy. These are a phenomenal earphone. I think the value is very good. It's not the best. I think they start at about $550 US dollars for these, which, an inexpensive earphone might be under $100, and then kind of an entry-level nice earphone might be $100 to $300, and then from maybe $300 to $700 maybe is where I think you start to get really high-quality earphones. Beyond that, you're kind of getting into the niche, really expensive, fancy customs and things like that. And so this falls kind of high-priced, kind of in that nice high-quality tier, as I said, but given the competition at that level, and I'd say the competition meaning probably things around the lines of the Dunu EST112, the S8, the Illumination's a little bit more, but still probably in that price bracket. And then a little bit lower than that, you have things like the Moondrop series. They have the, I think it's the Dusk is around $320. And then you might have things like the, what else is in that range? Anyway, for those sort of earphones in that price bracket, say $300 to $800, somewhere in there, they kind of squarely sit in the middle. but I would say that their quality is towards the top of the line. So at that bracket, I think they are a very good value. There are much better earphones for price value. I mean, the Etymotic ER2XR is insane value. I mean, just ridiculous. I think I got mine for less than $90. And if you put the brown Etymotic filters in there, it makes the treble response closer to the ER4, and it's a dynamic driver. So that is just out of the park value. And that makes things like this sometimes hard to swallow for me. However, this has a lot of benefits that the Etymotic doesn't have. First, they're shallow fit earphones. They're not in-ear canal phones, so they don't have the issue of comfort that the Etymotic has for a lot of people. They just don't want to wear them. And frankly, I have had issues with Etymotic in the past, and I love Etymotic. I have practically all their earphones ever made, and they're phenomenal. But I have some issues now and then with the fitting and the effects on my ears from the deep fit. So it's a refreshing listen to have something enjoyable that's, similar kind of neutral tonality that's comfortable. I don't have to stress about fitting and all that kind of stuff. Plus, these don't block as much noise as the Etymotic. They block a decent amount, and some people might want that extra noise isolation, but in some situations, it's actually a pain in the butt. I can't use my Etymotic at work because I can't hear anything, and then I have to take them out and put them back in, and then that gets uncomfortable, having to remove them and put them back in all the time. So those are some things that are kind of pros and cons. At the price, though, I think that, again, it's a great value. It really depends on what you're looking for. If you really want a linear, smooth, revealing, balanced armature earphone, this is among the best I've heard, and I highly recommend it. If you're willing to, try something in the dynamic driver or even the EST, the Dunu EST 112 is a very strong contender with these. It's a little bit warmer, but it has a slightly different treble character, and I think I prefer the treble character of the 112 in that it's just very relaxing and easy to listen to, and I could always enjoy the 112. Even though it doesn't always sound amazing and it's not the absolute best, it's never bad ever. Anything I put through those just sounds good and sometimes great. So I think in that regard, the 112 is probably a better value, and it would be a tough choice for me because while these are probably technically more along the lines of my frequency response target and that linear sound, the 112 has a very nice timbre because of that EST driver. Well, all the drivers and the combination it has, and that just kind of the relaxed tone that it has without being overly warm. And then for me personally, I just recently got hold of a set of C Audio Yume, how do you say that? And those are currently my favorite earphone, bar none, and those are $180, I believe. So I think something like that, which is a dynamic driver with 2 balanced armatures, that is probably even better value. But some people might like the frequency response that they get with these. They might like Dunu. Dunu seems like a great company with good quality products. It's well made. It sounds great. I don't think there's really much I can say bad about these other than there's a lot of competition coming in at that price range and lower now. So there's just a huge battlefield of IEMs lately, Chi-Fi, whatever you want to call it. So it really is going to come down to your personal taste. Does this fit the signature you're looking for? And do you like the styling, all the accessories it comes with, the whole package? If that's the case, then I absolutely give these a huge thumbs up. These are a great earphone. Highly recommend them. I'll just leave it there. If you guys have any questions at all, let me know. Again, thanks to Mark for letting me check these out. And as always, thank you guys for watching.